Hi everyone, welcome to The Drop. I'm Hatim and I'm joined here today by Hafiz Usman, and we're going to be talking about the crisis in Kashmir. First of all, Hafiz, thank you for joining us. And as we've seen over the past couple of days that the crisis in Kashmir has escalated, we have seen that the Indian government has issued another 180,000 troops to Kashmir. We've seen that there's been a brutal crackdown on dissent. And finally, of course, most importantly, that in the Rajya Sabha yesterday, there was a motion to abrogate Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. First of all, let's explain to our viewers what Article 35A and Article 370 of the Indian Constitution are and why are they important for the people of Kashmir.
Of course. So, some basic historical context first. At the time when Maharaja Hari Singh Dogra of Jammu and Kashmir decided to accede to India and sign the instrument of accession, one of the fundamental understandings of that instrument was that Kashmir would retain a limited kind of sovereignty. And in order for Kashmir to do that, some guarantees needed to be made to it. So within the constitution itself, Article 370 was a form of that guarantee, in which essentially all laws of the union were not necessarily applicable to Kashmir, and they would only be applicable by presidential order from time to time and with the consent of the Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. Article 35A is a bit different. It was introduced by the authority of Article 370 in 1954 by the President himself through a presidential order. And essentially Article 35A allows for Kashmiris to retain a right over who can or cannot settle in the region, which essentially means that the economic autonomy of the region, especially those who belong there, is protected against those settlers who are coming in from the rest of India. It's basically an attempt to ensure that a Gaza or West Bank type situation doesn't necessarily take place.
So, Hafiz, you talked about what Article 370 and 35A entail and why they're important to the people of Kashmir, but the important question here is whether or not it is legal for the Indian government to abrogate Article 370.
Definitely not in the manner it is attempted to. There are two problems with it. Firstly, the Indian government, in the absence of a sitting Constituent Assembly in Jammu and Kashmir, which by the way was dissolved in 1957, and by the time of its dissolution, it had decided to not touch Article 370. In the absence of such a Constituent Assembly, the Indian government cannot unilaterally, simply using the assent of the governor as a cover for being the government of Jammu and Kashmir, do this. That's the first problem. And the second problem is that the Indian government, in this current issue, has tried to be very clever. It has decided not to repeal 370 directly, but it has decided to repeal 370 by effect through essentially making changes to Article 367, which is a constitutional interpretation argument, a constitutional interpretation article. I wouldn't want to get into the details for that too much. I think our viewers would be bored. But the essential idea is there's a maxim of constitutional law. What cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly either. So however clever the legal consultants behind the Modi regime might have been, this is a colorable exercise of jurisdiction. This is constitutionally impermissible, ultra vires, just a no-go. The Indian government couldn't have done it this way, and I hope something is done at the level of the Supreme Court, although I have a feeling it might not really be as
Can we
effective.
expect the Supreme Court to spring into action? Because we have seen that the Modi government has often take very controversial stances that reflect its very hyper-nationalistic Hindutva sort of frame of mind. But can we expect the Supreme Court to intervene? And secondly, why the sudden urge to drag Kashmir into this entire, this entire very nationalistic fervor? Why are they trying their best to ensure that Article 370 is revoked? What is the, the logic behind this?
Okay, so as the first part of the question, what does the Supreme Court do? It literally depends upon the composition of the Supreme Court, right? So one would expect that the Supreme Court would launch itself into action and strike this down as an obviously colorable exercise of jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
Like in legal terms, this presidential order, in my opinion at least, is quorum non juris. It does not possess the correct jurisdiction. It is a colorable exercise of power and it should be struck down as ultra vires of the Constitution itself. In simpler terms, it is essentially an assault upon the Constitution. The Supreme Court should strike it down. But the politics of the Modi government is such that it has managed to muzzle all forms of opposition inside India. And I think it's highly unlikely that the Supreme Court, from the accounts that we are getting from India right now, will strike this down. But then again, this is mere speculation. We'll have to wait till this gets to the Supreme Court. The second part of the question, why did Modi do this? There's an external bit to this and there's an internal bit to this. So as far as the external politics of India is concerned, very recently, Imran Khan embarked on a tour of the United States of America. Imran Khan met the American president, Donald Trump. And Trump suggested that the United States of America play a more active role as an arbiter in the Kashmir problem. Now the problem is, given the Shimla Accord between Pakistan and India, which is a bilateral treaty signed between Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and Indira Gandhi, in the aftermath of the fall of Dhaka, it was decided that Kashmir and other issues would be engaged upon bilaterally. And India thereby says that in light of the Shimla Accord, Pakistan cannot use American help. And this is perhaps a message to Donald Trump that any American intervention is not going to be welcome. Secondly,
but I'm just going to cut you off right there. If India is implying that American intervention is not welcome, we need to keep in mind that India is still the United States' biggest, regional ally to counter China. And is this not a very confusing sort of stance for Indian foreign policy?
It seems a confusing stance, but if you think about it deeply, it really isn't. For example, they have now decided to divide the state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories. Jammu and Kashmir, which has a legislature of its own, and Ladakh, which by the way is a disputed territory between India and China, as another union territory. So essentially, India in one fell move has managed to antagonize both Pakistan and China. And perhaps in antagonizing China, knowing fully well that Trump and China aren't the best of friends, it's trying to balance out the fact that it's giving the United States of America a shut-up call, while at the same time it's proving its allyship to the United States of America by giving China a concurrent shut-up call as well. So it's a bit complicated. I'll move on from that though. Pakistan has played an essential role in the Afghan-Taliban peace process, in the Afghanistan peace process. We are one of the reasons for why the peace process is reaching completion, and we are one of the reasons for why Afghanistan is looking at stability in the future. And this makes Pakistan's position with the United States of America stronger, which is a direct attack on the balance of power within the region, because India considers itself dominant against Pakistan in light of its more cordial relations with the United States of America. So perhaps this is also a way through which India wants to exert some kind of dominance over the region by letting everyone know that it has raw power at its disposal. And just like Putin or even Hitler and Mussolini in the past, it's not afraid of using that raw power if necessary. So that's the external politics.
You mentioned, obviously you mentioned Hitler and Mussolini, but we can also draw a lot of parallels with Putin and Modi here as well, that despite the fact that there was a lot of outcry yesterday from the international community, especially from the Muslim countries, that they should not be doing what they're doing to Kashmir right now, they still wanted to show and exhibit that power, that we are capable of doing whatever we want and we are not culpable to,
Look, Hatim, this is brazen barbarism at its worst.
Absolutely.
The people of Kashmir are the most important stakeholders in the process. They have not been included in the process at all. The government of Kashmir does not exist right now. It is in a state of suspended animation.
Absolutely.
The only representative coming close to the idea of a government in Kashmir right now would be the governor. The governor is a representative of the center. If Satyapal Malik, who's the governor, signs off on anything, that doesn't mean that he's a representative of Kashmiri sentiment on the matter.
He's a representative of the federal government, basically.
Exactly. And India has carried out a complete blackout over Kashmir right now. Informationally, technologically, logistically. Kashmir is like Gaza. They can't speak out. They are completely powerless right now. There's a curfew. They are under the greatest state of military occupation as compared to in the past, any other point in the past.
It is the most militarized region in the world.
And this is the most autocratic India has ever been. Look, India has a vibrant democratic tradition, a constitutionalist tradition that goes back all the way to the late 40s and 50s. And it's not like India is a state which has had like an interventionist military. India is not a state like that. So for India to become such an autocratic bastion is troublesome indeed. It shows that right-wing politics is more powerful than anyone gave it credit for. And Modi, after his electoral victory, is going to use raw force and power to get his way, however, whatever the methods he's using and whatever the consequences of that might be.
All right, so just a two-parter here. First of all, this is a very interesting, sort of comparison with the Kartarpur talks that are happening. The corridor is being built and there is progress being made on that one side. But we can also see that Pakistan is unfortunately, despite the fact that we have taken a precedence for peace, where the country has taken a step towards peace, but the Indian government is still continuing to do whatever it wants to. My question is, what should Pakistan's response be here? Because the opposition parties have been arguing that our response has been inadequate and we have not taken up the Kashmiri cause as much as the governments that preceded us.
Look, in all fairness to the sitting government right now, in the past, in the recent past at least, in the Nawaz Sharif government at least, our response to the Kashmir issue was woefully inadequate.
It was.
If you were to look at the joint declaration that was issued at Ufa between the Prime Minister of Pakistan at that time, Mia Nawaz Sharif, and Prime Minister Modi, there was barely any mention of Kashmir.
There was no mention of Kashmir.
My memory serves me correctly, there was no mention of Kashmir whatsoever. Pakistan stopped caring about Kashmir. Based on the hopes that perhaps India had stopped caring about Kashmir, in perhaps a bid to keep the status quo where it was and to ensure that there was no volatility within the situation. The problem is, Modi is more unpredictable than he ever was because he now possesses the kind of unbridled power that no other politician in India has ever possessed. And he's volatile. He has an agenda, an ideological agenda. He cannot stand the fact that Kashmir is the only Muslim majority state in India right now. Notice, Kashmir is not even a state right now. It's being relegated to the position of a union territory. It's going to have less power. The legislature of Jammu and Kashmir will have less authority than the legislature of Goa. I'm not exaggerating right now. That's what they're doing to Kashmir. So in light of all that, Pakistan needs to take a stronger position. Pakistan is already taking a stronger position. The Prime Minister is reaching out to its ally countries. We are trying to internationalize the issue. Keep in mind the fact that Pakistan's case when it came to Kashmir was never taken seriously internationally. What does the Pakistan government do? Well, there are diplomatic solutions. We are pursuing them. But I think it is high time, and it pains my heart to say this, but I think it's high time that we do, constitutionally of course, what India has unconstitutionally done to Jammu and Kashmir by incorporating Azad Jammu and Kashmir as a part of Pakistan and by applying the laws of Pakistan to it. Because for all intents and purposes, it is a part of Pakistan and we can't allow this to become a disputed territory while India is treating the Kashmir issue right now as a purely internal problem.
Thank you, Hafiz, for joining us today. Thank you for these insights. It's been a pleasure to have you. This is it for The Drop. We will be covering the Kashmir issue as it continues to go on, but this is it for today. Thank you.
We're really excited to share fantastic content with you
on all the fun topics.
Please subscribe to our channel by
clicking on the subscribe button below.